Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to stand here in front of you and talk to you to the topic of civil society as change makers in crisis. My name is Düzen Tekkal. I'm a journalist, filmmaker, and social entrepreneur. But before I begin, I would like to thank the mayors, Franziska Giffey and Ana Hidalgo, for their mayoral keynotes and for their service of two wonderful cities, opening them up to the world and making them open hubs and places of mutual exchange. I had prepared a whole different speech for today, but yesterday something happened that flipped my table. Frankly, this happens quite often in my job as a human rights activist, because you are connected with the lives of many people. As we all know, life does not stand still. So the young woman you see here on the right side, Jian Alomar, she's 19 years old and a Yazidi survivor from Shingal in Iraq. She and her mother survived the genocide that was perpetrated in 2014 against her religious community by the terrorist militia that is known as ISIS, the Islamic State, or as Daesh. The woman on the left side of the picture is Jian's older sister, Suzanne. She was missing for a long time. Yesterday, the news reached out that she was found by Kurdish security forces in Syria. She was finally freed from ISIS captivity. Suzanne was 16 years old when the genocide happened. She and Jian were separated by the ISIS militants shortly after they took control of their home city, Sinjar city. Jian and her mother managed to escape from captivity after 10 months under high risk of getting caught and punished. They made their way to Germany with a special quota project for Yazidis in need by the German state, Baden-Württemberg. Jian was able to start a new life and wrote a book about her experience. She is a human rights activist right now, also ambassador for our human rights organization. For 8 long years, Suzanne's family didn't know if she's alive or not. 8 long years of uncertainty and in fear that she might not be alive anymore. As I'm speaking, Suzanne is transferred from Syria to Iraq today. Hopefully, she can be reunited with her sister and mother in Germany soon. We will work on that. Why I'm telling you this? Because it is these women and their stories of courage and strength that keep me going every day, and because they show us what is humanly possible in the darkest of times. Of course, no one should ever go through what these women went through, but I often catch myself thinking what we call crisis in Europe seems pretty small compared to what is going on in other parts of this world. For me, these women are heroes, and we can learn a lot from their example. The fate of Jian and Suzanne is closely like to my own, because I was there as well when ISIS overran the region and attacked the Yazidi community, which is also my own community. Although I grew up in the diaspora here in Germany, I left my secular life here, left it behind me to go to a war in August 2014. Just 5 days before James Foley, brutally murdered by ISIS in Raqqa in Syria, a murder that shocked the whole wide world. And 11 days after the initial attack on my community, I left my safe country, Germany, and boarded an airplane to Iraq. I've seen people in fear and how their lives were threatened in a very real way. I've seen ISIS fighters with their black flags on pickup trucks and on tanks chasing people. I've seen those facing and fighting them seriously wounded, many of them nearly dying. I've seen mothers carrying their children to their graves. I was confronted with the horror of war, not only from a journalist point of view. My mission also had a deeper meaning. It was the first time that I fought on the soil of my ancestors. Because initially, this trip was meant as a journey to my roots. Now it was shaken up by a crisis, a full-fledged genocide. And now I had to report the world about the atrocities inflicted on my people. So in this journey, I connected to both the horror and my roots, those roots that meant so much to me, from a family, religious, and identity perspective. I learned how close violence and beauty can coexist next to each other within me. I was placed in transformation and forced to be resilient. And this is what we all have to become, to face the challenges that our time confronts us with. I left the security of Germany and stepped into a war. Why did I do this? Because my action always were greater than my fear. Looking back to my life-changing moment, but also to most of what I did before and after, I can see that choosing action over fear is one of the strongest recurring themes in my life. Overcoming fear through action and impact is not particularly ingrained into the German mindset. Germany and Germans are often seen as hesitant in times when action is needed the most. And I say this being a German, because as much as my name, my religion, my heritage does not belong to this country, I am a proud German citizen. German Angst has become a synonym that is known worldwide for nationalism and insecurity and fear. And because I'd like to think of myself as the opposite, and because it bothers me that we were here in Germany are seen like this from the outside world, I wanted to change that. That's exactly why I have a dream, a German dream. In contrast to German Angst, a society which is built on values, empathy, love, and courage, instead of being ingrained with racism, nationalism, or other forms of discrimination. I know that Germany is so much more and can be even more, also its civil societies. And to bring that German dream, or European dream, or global dream to life, I believe we need more activism. This is why me and my sisters founded the human rights organizations HÁWAR.help, out of the ashes of genocide I spoke of today, to help survivors and elevate their voices to the public and political decision makers. This made the topic of the genocide bigger. Now there are court hearings against ISIS perpetrators in debates in the German Bundestag. And this is something we and the survivors are very proud of. Later, we founded the educational initiative German Dream, which we want to empower civil society by engaging into a fruitful dialogue about chances, values, and perspectives, especially with and for marginalized people. Because we deeply believe that everyone can follow his or her individual German dream in this country. We need this kind of activism. One that comes from the full, the light, the joyful, and not from the burnout, bitter and fearful. What I see in today's public sphere and in the corporate world so much. So here are my 5 recommendations and tips on how I believe we are able to overcome crisis and forge a strong civil society. 1, leave your comfort zone. In my family's case, comfort zone would have been deadly. It's important to have a culture of error. It's also important to lead humanly and with heart. It's important to rely on your gut feeling. It's important to leave your comfort zone again and again and again and to take risks. This feeling that comes when you grow and develop like you do, in what we do with both of our organizations. We want those affected to have their say and not to be silenced by oppressive social structures. Second, there's always crisis. And that is exactly where impact is generated. I'm convinced of that. That's why we have to become crisis managers and not just problem solvers. We are not crisis tested in Europe, but that's a muscle we have to exercise. Crisis is a constant. It's about surfing this wave. That's what we try to do every day, also by being relational, following what Hannah Arendt called die Liebe zur Welt, the love for the world. Third, team is everything. There is no I, no ego in times of crisis. We have to cast aside the neoliberal mindset, which is in part responsible for the crisis we see today, and adopt a mindset of relational culture. This is what we are doing day by day in our organizations. Very successful, together as a team. That doesn't mean to abandon individuals' freedom altogether. They are very important. But we have to understand that the individual is nothing without the community. And that is something international. We deeply feel that right now with the Russia crisis, which leads me to my fourth point, humanity. Compassion is a muscle. You should work on it. Train it every single day. 5, make your joy driving force. If I have learned anything, no one, not any dead or alive persons, are served if you are in a bad mood. If you are ashamed of your privileges, if you are castigated yourself, it's your responsibility to lead yourself. And from what I've learned, coming from a full cup that is driven by a dream, by connection, by joy, rather than angst of the future, is one of the strongest drivers. Just as humanity is a muscle, joy is also a muscle. We need to cultivate it. To dream, that sounds naive, I know, but that is one of the most important binding forces, to cultivate big dreams and then to realize them, to be a possibilist. I dream of a society in which it doesn't matter what religion, what wallet, what background one has, but what we can all achieve together, choosing and being driven by an individual and collective German dream rather than to freeze in German angst. Thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.